Hello, my name is Brett Spence, and today we'll be talking about Napoleon's Syria campaign. Alright, let's begin. In February 1799, the Sultan had sent two large armies to crush the French army and retake Egypt. Napoleon marched to face the 3,000-strong Ottoman army coming from Syria with 13,000 men on the 10th of February. As the French army marched through the Sinai Desert, where the French army suffered from the heat, lack of food and water, but the French army managed to get to the town of El Arish, which was garrisoned by 3,000 Ottoman soldiers, and the French laid siege to the town till the 20th, when the garrison surrendered and Napoleon gave them generous terms. They were disarmed, but they were allowed to leave after swearing an oath not to take up arms against the French for a year. The French continued on their march into Palestine, where they were able to resupply from the fruit trees, which made the soldiers very happy. On the 24th of February, the French occupied Gaza, where they were able to resupply from the storerooms which were abandoned by the Ottomans. Napoleon then moved towards the port city of Jaffa, which was garrisoned by 5,000 Ottoman soldiers. The French laid siege to Jaffa on March 3rd, and Napoleon's field guns opened fire on the city's walls. And when a breach was made, Napoleon sent a messenger to invite surrender to spare both sides the horrors of an assault. The Ottomans responded by cutting off the messenger's head and displaying his head on the city walls. Enraged by this, the French soldiers stormed the breach and took the breach, and when they fled into the city, they embarked on a looting and killing spree that lasted for 24 hours. The butchery was indiscriminate. The French slaughtered women and children, and the next day order was gradually restored. With the capture of Jaffa, Napoleon now had 3,000 prisoners with no way to feed or transport them to Egypt, and not wanting to guard them, and also he found out that the garrison at Jaffa had some of the garrison from El Arish. Angered by the oath-breaking and the death of his messenger, he ordered the execution of the prisoners. For 3 days, the French led the prisoners in batches to the beach and killed them, with some being shot or driven into the sea. But on the third day, in order to save ammo, they used bayonets to kill them. This atrocity would follow Napoleon for the rest of his life, with Napoleon saying he had no choice, but the massacre was used as propaganda by Napoleon's enemies. While they were resting in Jaffa, as if by divine judgment, the army had fallen sick with bubonic plague. Napoleon showed considerable bravery when visiting the sick in hospital. Napoleon then moved towards the port city of Acre. The city was famed for its role in the Third Crusade, and now the city was the seat of the local Ottoman governor. That said governor was Alim Pasha al-Jazar, who was nicknamed the Butcher for his deadly ambushes on a group of Bedouin tribesmen for killing his first master in a raid. He ruled Syria for 25 years with an iron fist and was notorious for his imaginative torture and executions. Ahmed Pasha was supported by 2 British ships of the line to help him protect the city. When Napoleon arrived at Mount Carmel, 12 miles from Acre, he saw the British capture a French coastal convoy which was carrying his vital siege guns, which was a massive blow. Napoleon hopes to end the siege quickly. On the 18th of March, Napoleon laid siege to the city despite having no siege guns to bombard the city's defenses, which would be a major challenge considering Acre was bristling with 250 guns covered by the sea on 3 sides and walls 8 feet thick. The commander of the British forces was Commodore Sir Sidney Smith, who was accompanied by a French emigre, Antoine de Filicu, who was a former classmate of Napoleon. He provided advice for siege warfare for Sidney. On the 10th day of the siege, with field artillery, they had began their bombardment of the city. They managed to make a small breach, but they were overwhelmed by Allied counterfire, which killed 40 gunners and disabled all but 3 guns. With most of the artillery gone, Napoleon ordered his infantry with scaling ladders, but a hidden moat broke up their assault, and the defenders fired their muskets or hurled rocks at them. Facing this onslaught, the French disorderly retreated back to their lines, but those who were captured were beheaded, since Ahmed Pasha offered a reward for every French head that was brought to him. The Ottomans then launched a sortie, but was repelled by the French, and they suffered heavy losses. As the siege dragged on, Napoleon waited for his new siege guns from Alexandria before risking another assault, but Napoleon's scouts reported for that day, 4,000-strong Ottoman army was moving to relieve the siege at Acre. Napoleon could only spare 4,000 men to deal with the relief force. Despite the long odds, Napoleon trusted in the quality of his officers and the training and experience of his troops to deal with the enemy army. But he was unsure where the enemy would come from. He divided his forces to cover all possible areas of advance. The divided French forces defeated larger Ottoman forces at Nazareth, Cana, and Jacob Bridge. On the 15th of April, the Ottoman relief force had camped near Mount Amoret. General Kleber, who was seeking glory, advanced his division with the intention to surprise the Ottoman army at dawn. But unfortunately for Kleber, he arrived at the Ottoman campsite when the sun was up, and his 1,500 men were now facing 35,000-strong Ottoman army on open ground. Kleber ordered his men to form square and held off the Ottoman army for 10 hours under the scorching heat. Luckily for Kleber, Napoleon was waiting to support him with 2,500 men, and when he arrived, he attacked the Ottoman camp, and the Ottoman army, seeing that they were about to be attacked in the rear, they panicked and they fled in all directions, and the Ottoman army was destroyed by the French. With the French decisive winning the Battle of Mount Tabor, the French secured control over Palestine, and hopefully Acre would fall. But unfortunately for Napoleon, due to the British still controlling the sea, it meant that the city was able to get supplies and reinforcements and wasn't going to surrender anytime soon, while Napoleon's supplies were running low, and to make things worse, plague had broken out in the French camp. But on the 24th of April, a French mine exploded underneath one of Acre's towers and caused a breach in the wall. Napoleon then ordered his grenadiers to storm the breach, but they were repelled by a torrent of Allied fire. On the 7th of May, Napoleon's replacement siege guns had arrived, and the following day the French bombarded the city. The bombardment created more breaches in the city's walls, and Napoleon ordered another assault on the city, with some units able to get into the city, but they were driven off with an Allied counterattack. On May 10th, Napoleon ordered Kleber's grenadiers to launch a final assault on the city, with Kleber leading the charge. During the assault, Napoleon observing the battle when an enemy cannonball nearly hit him, but it did knock him off his feet. With this assault failing, Napoleon called off the siege, with Napoleon suffering 4,500 casualties in the 4-month siege. On May 20th, Napoleon ordered his army to return to Egypt, with those who were unable to march were massacred with an overdose of laudanum to prevent them from suffering from the plague and what Ahmed Pasha's men would do to them, but this decision is still controversial. When they arrived in Cairo on the 14th of June, Napoleon made out his Syrian campaign as a triumph, which he wasn't wrong. Despite him unable to hold his newfound conquest, he did destroy the Ottoman army in Syria. After a few weeks of resting, Napoleon got news that the Ottoman invasion force had landed in Abu Qir. Napoleon immediately marched to face the Ottoman army before they could break out of the Nile Delta. The Ottoman army was under the command of Mustafa Pasha. He had 18,000 men, and he ordered them to dig trenches and garrison the Abu Qir fortress. On the 25th of July, the French arrived with 10,000 men, and they plowed through the Ottoman defensive lines, with Joachim Murat capturing Mustafa Pasha at the tip of his sword. The remaining troops held up in the fortress till the 2nd of August, where the Ottoman garrison surrendered. The victory at Abu Qir had done much to repair Napoleon's reputation after the defeat at Acre, but news from France had reached Napoleon, and it was not good. A second coalition had formed against France, and led by Britain, Russia, and Austria, and had captured all the French holdings in Italy, which Napoleon had won during his first campaign. With France under the threat of invasion, Napoleon, along with Berthier, Marmont, Lannes, and Murat, quietly boarded the French frigate Meron near Alexandria and headed back to France on the 23rd of August. Before he left a short proclamation. The news from Europe has determined me to proceed to France. I leave command of the army to General Kleber. The army shall hear from me forthwith. At present I can say no more. It's cost me much pain to quit troops to whom I am so strongly attached. Kleber was not happy with his sudden promotion. In fact, to quote him, he's deserted us with his breeches full of mud. When we get back to Europe, we'll rub his face in it. Napoleon's voyage to France was dangerous, one with close calls with the Royal Navy, but Napoleon managed to get to France, and on the way, a visit to the town of his birth in Corsica for the final time. On October 9th, when Napoleon arrived in France, he was hailed as a hero thanks to his propaganda, making the campaign more successful than it naturally was. But back in Egypt, on the 14th of June, 1800, Kleber was assassinated by a Muslim radical named Salim al-Aibi at the palace of Alfi Bakar Garden in Cairo. The remains of the Army of the Orient would surrender to the British Army on the 2nd of September 1801 after the siege of Alexandria, and they would later be repatriated to France under the Treaty of Amiens. The legacy of the expedition was the new study called Egyptology and the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, which was taken as a war trophy by the British, and the stone allowed us to understand ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, which meant that we can understand ancient Egypt better. If you like this video, like and subscribe. See you next time.